Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my Godzilla -1 non-spoiler review. This has been available in the States for a little over 2 weeks now. It's just had its second weekend, but it has not been released widely across the world. It's just come to the UK. In fact, it officially releases on Friday, but if you're a member of a theatre chain in the UK, you can see some advanced screenings, so I managed to watch this last night. As said from the off, this will be a non-spoiler review. I'll cover some light plot points, but just to give you, an air of what's happening when I'm talking about certain bits and pieces, but no actual spoilers, because I think, this is a film that you really should go and see. I adored this film. I think this film is probably the best film of the year so far. And looking at the rest of the slate that's going to be released, there's nothing else that's actually going to top it from what I can see. This is hands down the best Godzilla film that's ever been made, as well as, like I said, the best film of 2023 in my eyes. Anyway, it's got everything that you would want in a film, quite frankly, and there's very little. There's very little detractors to it. To be honest, I can't really think of much that I disliked. I watched this in subtitles, so it was original. Japanese performance, Japanese audio, and the performances are great. They are a little bit Japanese, which, by that I mean there's a certain air of a theatrical nature to certain bits and pieces, but I wouldn't say that that's detracting at all, by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I would say that adds to the immersion, quite frankly. So, what is the story about? Well, it is set, actually, for the most part, after the war, but there is a little bit during the war, or as things were coming to an end anyway. So I guess still kind of post-war, things were coming to an end, and then the bulk of this is set post-World War II. And Japan is deeply, deeply unsettled by everything that's happened during World War II. It doesn't try to paint itself out as necessarily a victim. Japan versus the States is a victim or anything like that. It's very much an anti-war film, but in the respect that the only ones that lose in war are citizens, right? And it's not trying to claim that the United States was bad for anything that they did or anything like that. And I think it's important to say, because when you're looking at this film, and there is a very clear anti-war message, but it's not from a propagandized stance. It's very much normal, everyday citizens at the behest of their government. And it literally says, it is very critical of the Japanese government, were robbed of their life and any futures that they could possibly have with their families, right? It's very much from that angle. And like I said, they're critical of the Japanese government. So it's important to say this is not like an anti-US film at all, right? At all. If anything, it's anti-Japanese government of that time period. And it's just absolutely reeling from the war. Japan is just in utter disarray. They're trying to rebuild, but there's the somber tone, loved ones lost, and it's really quite brutal, quite frankly, all of that. It touches on kamikaze pilots and the sort of honor system involved, and respect, and all such things. Our lead is literally a kamikaze pilot who essentially was, too cowardly, I guess, to go and off himself as his role as a kamikaze pilot. And this is important, but it's not a spoiler. So it's important to understand that our lead is a kamikaze pilot because of his headspace. And he's tortured by things which have occurred during the war. And very early on, we are introduced to a Godzilla, I guess. And I say that because there's elements of this film as it progresses where it builds a new lore and mythology of Godzilla. So we're introduced very early on, and the visual effects are just brilliant. And I know loads of people, you can be very critical of them through one lens, because you could say, well, they're not quite as refined as the sort of Western world. But I would go one step to the contrary to that and say, actually, the fact that they are not as refined gives them an air of realism. I mean, I looked at some of this stuff and it looked very reminiscent of, say, Jurassic Park back in the day. And that stuff still holds up to this day. It absolutely holds up. So I actually think, this movie not having over bloated CGI was a betterment to it, quite frankly. So anyway, we're introduced to this sort of proto version of a Godzilla. And it's brilliant, beautifully done, harrowing, just absolutely harrowing. And then from there, like I said, post-war, things start to develop. This chap meets someone, sort of family dynamic starts to occur, all this kind of stuff. I don't want to get too much into that because, if I said any more and where it could go from that as a discussion point would be considered a spoiler. But just say that this movie has a real heart from a citizen's perspective and an everyday man's perspective. That's kind of the way I can round it out. Anyway, as one would imagine, post-war, they're trying to rebuild, and they do. But something gets spotted and something begins to tear apart Japan again. And it's Godzilla. In all of his forms, you've seen it in the trailers, so it's not a spoiler. He absolutely wrecks house. They call his atomic breath a heat ray in this, because they're obviously not going to quite understand what it is. It's a heat ray, and it's probably the best depiction of it, of the atomic breath you could ever have. You saw it in one of the trailers, the spines light up, but the dorsal plates push out from his spine, and they do that in sequence, linear sequence, all the way up his back, and then they all shunt in. It's like a loaded shotgun type thing. So they pop out all in linear sequence, and they pop back in, and boom, this heat ray. And my God, to say it's probably the most powerful atomic breath we've seen, as well as the best depiction of it loading up, I think is worthy. It is absolutely it is the most powerful atomic breath we've seen. I think it just decimates everything in its path, but in a really brutal way. So, I mean, everything pushes out at extreme force and power. The shockwave blast, but then it also almost implodes again as well. It's just remarkably done. And the visual effects of Godzilla in the form that we see in the trailers is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah. And it blends so seamlessly. And whether that's because of how they've color graded the set piece that they're working with, I don't know. It's not as out of place as other giant monsters in things, right? And I think a lot of it's to do with color grading. Takashi Yamazaki is the director, the writer. He also oversaw the VFX, so he literally worked on, I believe anyway, some of the VFX. He oversaw it anyway. And they're incredible. They are absolutely incredible VFX. When that score hits, holy shit, was that amazing. It was so incredible. So incredible. And that leads me on to my next massive praise for this film, is the use of sound. So they have such a great use of sound. The scores are great. The sound design is great, to the use of no sound. There is a scene in this movie, if you've seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where there's no sound at all, and then they fade in one sound effect in particular, but there's no sound for a very long period of time. In the theatre, there's just some repugnant arsehole that's there. It was dead silent in the theatre, because it was palpable. You could feel the tension, and then the sound comes in. Incredible. I've not seen It's been a long time since I've seen a movie that utilises no sound as a sound so well in its sound design. And Godzilla Minus One did it absolutely brilliantly. Absolutely brilliantly. Godzilla is an absolute force of nature. Force of nature. Holy. Now, this thing walks in. I mean, you know, he's not the biggest Godzilla. But my God, is he the most destructive? You know, like, Japan has made some sort of funny trends of always trying to one-up Legendary's Godzilla here and there. But they didn't with this one. They kept him downsize. He's nowhere near as big as Legendary's Godzilla. But he is just terrifying. And the way the design is beautiful and horrifying all at the same time. It's great. And, you know, it's good to see Godzilla back. It's good to see a serious Godzilla film again. And it's good to see Godzilla back as just this unstoppable force that is claiming territories and trying to destroy everything. And nothing can stop him. Nothing. I mean, he destroys a destroyer. Like nothing. Just gone. Bye-bye. Amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing. You will feel... I mean, you'll run the gamut of emotions during this movie. Like, it's a very emotionally powerful film. And it deserves every single bit of praise that it's getting. Every little bit of praise that it's getting. And, you know, if you're going to look at this film from a messaging perspective, because a lot of people are like, there's no messaging. There actually is, but it's good messaging. You know? How a man can forgive himself for past horrors, his own internal wars and trauma, and become a better individual to look after, you know, to become a family man, you know? I mean, that's strong male values. And this film promotes that. So when people say that there's no messaging at all, they're wrong, because there is. But it's such good messaging that obviously people just praise it instead of pointing it out. But it's important to be praised, because praised and pointed out, sorry, because my God, you know, the last time I watched a film with such good values, I cannot remember. Yeah. I left the theatre in literally disbelief and speechless, and I drove home about like 10:30 at night. And it was very somber, because again, this film has a very heavy anti-war message. But again, only from a perspective of everyday citizens being caught in the crossfire of just governmental forces, basically. So great film. Strong recommendation. Probably the best film of 2023. It is my best film of 2023 to date. And from what I can see, there's nothing that's going to top it. So if you've seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It deserves every single bit of praise. And looking at the films it's being compared against, it absolutely deserves that VFX Oscar that it is potentially in the running for. So like I said, drop your thoughts down below. Hit subscribe if you are new here. Cheers guys. Take care. Bye-bye now.